Proud Patriot Rerun. Does this essay make sense? Did you enjoy an education that allows you to readily understand this essay whether or not you agree? Or is it confusing? Or boring? Does anyone have a better explanation? If you like figuring out historical currents and trends, then read this slowly and respond intelligently. Thumbs up. Winking face. Smiling face with smiling eyes and rosy cheeks. Smiling face with glasses. Red apple. Peace hand sign. Red heart. Flag of the United States. 2020. Socialism Unmasked by Andy Groft. On Wednesday I read the pictured Facebook meme from Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA stating that socialism leads to communism. Having read most of Marx's seminal works in college, I mostly agree with the meme. But communism can also lead to socialism, because both are structures of human order maintained by force and by the dictates of the state. Both communism and socialism can lead to the other because they are both control structures that must manipulate rational thinking to appeal to reasonable humans, because reasonable human beings would never agree to the true meaning and intended results of either. Neither appeal to personal sovereignty, nor a common-sense universal respect for another human being. Neither communism nor socialism put any value on the reasonable decisions of individuals, families or even local communities, because control structures, especially those outside of the family and intimate community, are not meant to improve the human condition. They are meant to control it. Should we ask, what is socialism, or should we ask, how can I come to understand and adequately define socialism? Even, what are the combined actions and processes that we call socialism? Before answering a question about, say, socialism, a person might be persuaded to read a few definitions of socialism in advance. She might see that the definitions she is reading or videos she is viewing are, helping her remember what she does know about those actions called socialism, b. helping to clarify her own understanding of those actions called socialism, and c. ultimately just the opinions and perspectives of people who are clarifying their own observations at best, and at worst are parroting tradition and authority, without any real meaning. After considering these things, she would surely discuss the ideas behind socialism more intelligently. If a friend was coming over to visit and discuss a question about, say, communism, a person might read and consider an apology, a piece of communication in support of those actions as well as a polemic, a piece of communication in opposition to it. He might listen and weigh carefully in hopes of discerning the truth. He might consider using reason and intuition in his epistemology, the way he comes to understand, or the way he learns, what is seen, and what is not seen here. He might ask himself or others in the discussion. He might consider the intended and unintended consequences of this or that definition. And finally, he might want to avoid thinking it's his job to know the answer. Instead, he and his friend should work together to remove contradictions and come to a better understanding by the end of the discussion. For the simplicity that lies this side of complexity, I would not give a fig. But for the simplicity that lies on the other side of complexity, I would give my life. Oliver Wendell Holmes. Since simple reason cannot support a case for forced happiness, a more sophisticated reason must be invented to do the job. Those inclined to support control structures like communism, socialism, corporatism and other tyrannies typically fall into these 5 categories. First, the sinister who feel justified in their control, deception and legal plunder. The justifications abound. Second, the panderers who grovel for position and status no matter who is in power. Third, the propagandized who have been taught what to think, and who find it difficult to discuss simple things, especially if they go against the party line. These guys argue in complexity because it's the only way to argue for control structures at all. If a small group of friends could employ reason, intuition and a shared goal to achieve a broad-based consensus of the meaning of the words being discussed, the discussion would obliterate the power of the propaganda that holds them spellbound. Since control structures like communism are unreasonable, the propagandized are taught to be sophisticated, to depend on others in authority to think for them, and to scoff at the simple as naive. The propagandized are usually obsessed with authority, and if sophistication can't win their arguments, virtue signaling, emotional shaming and personal attacks will. It's not that these people are stupid, it's that they sadly have been brainwashed, programmed to think and respond correctly. Fourth, the fearful who clearly see the paradox but cannot say it for fear of retribution by their peers, their employer or the state. Fifth, the ignorant who simply don't know anything is wrong. For a variety of reasons from laziness to forced government bans, there are some who happily support control structures. This group generally doesn't know any different. They lack historical comparisons that could shape their thinking about their own situation. Since they never learned to discuss, they don't know how to think. Those drawn to liberty structures cannot defend their position from the simplicity on the near side of complexity because this side represents ignorance. Neither can they offer a defense in complexity itself because this is the only hope for the champions of propaganda and the doorway to insanity. Defenders of liberty must find their defense in the simplicity on the far side of the muddy waters of complexity. Their defense cannot be ignorant, but it must transcend the Platonic idiom of sophisticated reason. Marx claimed the Hegelian dialectic could apply to militaristic communism as the best antithesis to capitalism. The synthesis of the two, he postulated, would lead to the final goal, a softer communism, overseen by a virtuous bureaucracy, a vanguard of the proletariat. This fully evolved human order would end history by eliminating race, class and religious conflict. The plan would compel prepackaged right actions enforced by the state for the good of all. From poets like John Milton to prophets like John the Revelator, literature and scripture speak of a sinister and primordial war of wars where freedom is pitted against force. Marx may have had every correct intention, and still his plan was evil because its only rationale is complicated, and its first and final recourse is force. Marxist socialism was sold as a way to improve capitalism, and to be an order dedicated to the fair distribution of wealth. But read Marx and one quickly suspects curved intentions. His philosophy of political organizations forced to abandon liberties and the God who gave them, in exchange for safety and harmony through forced compliance to a powerful state reeks of deception. Who buys that stuff? Those who seek control or seek positions in control structures buy it in bulk. Marx's idea of a peaceful Shangri-La reads more like a Machiavellian cover for a modern and socially palatable neo-feudalism. I mean, look what happened. The aristocrats ate up Marx's Das Kapital like the Medicis were meant to devour Machiavelli's The Prince. If Marx didn't see the irrational and dangerous nature of his forced utopia, he should have. Lenin, Stalin and Mao surely did, and they capitalized on it. Hey, we're here to make things better. We represent the majority opinion. They never did, and you need to cede power to us so that we can make this utopian plan come to pass. They all said it in one way or another. They are saying it now. Early in America's foray into the world of nations, the global aristocracy realized they couldn't let the land of the free go unchallenged. America's free and prosperous people were a threat to their ruse of control. The aristocratic social order couldn't hold up to a prosperous and happy America. 18th and 19th century aristocrats assumed correctly that if America succeeded, then monarchies, aristocracies and similar control structures would lose prestige. The people would realize how good their lives could be by simply reorganizing and agreeing to keep some simple rules as free people. After failing to divide and conquer America in 1864, the global aristocracies began to entertain the ideas of Marx as a populist movement the masses might buy. They would lure commoners back in line with words like equality and inclusion, and they would do it over time. This was war to them, only the strategy changed. Since they couldn't conquer America with brute force, they would revert to a longer, more elaborate strategy, and once the ridiculous experiment in freedom was quashed, the elite would never again lose their grip on power. They would brainwash, dumb down, delete, rarite and enslave if needs be. They would use every tool of technology to maintain control. Their plan may take time, but the triumphant return of royalty and caste would be glorious. A 234-year interregnum, that's all. Hegel witnessed the American Revolution and its disrupting effects on the global order of the time. Marx studied Hegel and published the Communist Manifesto in 1848. By 1884 this new slow invasion strategy emerged from the cabal. It was as a synthesis of this Karl Marx style of populism and the slow march tactics of the Roman general Fabius Maximus. Fabius gained fame during the Punic Wars for his destructive strategies carried out deftly and with precision. But over time, under cover and employing a constant and cycling barrage of pushing boundaries, embedding time bombs and then backing off, the Fabian Society and their associates of common cause agreed to a 100-year-long march with the goal of gaining partial and then complete control of all key American organizations, religion, education, commerce, entertainment, media and government bureaucracies and elected officials by the end of the 20th century. They would claim that socialism was not as selfish as capitalism and not as extreme as communism. The perfect evolution of world order. The Fabian Society organized 136 years ago in 1884, their post-America world order. They knew, would never hold up to the scrutiny of simple reason. So they created conflict and war to justify interventions and control. They would usurp liberty in the name of safety and order. Soon, caste and slavery could be reintroduced, and this sinister cabal could then smugly usher in the triumphant return of the global aristocracy. They were ousted from our free land and from much of the world stage just 2 centuries ago, and today their stratagem to reassume power is coming to a head. The aristocratic structures and the twisted and tyrannical lifestyles of the global power centers of the 18th and 19th centuries were hit hard by the audacity of the American founding. The breach in the global order was so massive that the constantly recycled and sinister ruse that a global elite was necessary to ordered happiness crumbled. 2.5 centuries later, after a 100+ years of concerted orchestration, we are quickly approaching America's worst nightmare. The global elite don't just want the country we stole from them back. They want to be recognized as superior, a likely universal human failing rooted in insecurities, confusion and simple wrong thinking. And yes, they want to rule over you. A new but virtually lockstep global aristocracy. Some new money and some from elitist families with deep historical roots, and vision and lust for an order of central control, not one of widespread liberty. They signal their virtue, but their intentions are curved. Choice is their right. Compliance is yours. As superior to common people, and as the self-proclaimed ordered voice of the people, they use lies and wars to carry on their tyranny. From the Greek and then Latin tyrannus, tyr from Thor, meaning war and like annual, or a time of os meaning full of, or that which is tyranny, a time of war. You've seen it played out in history and literature, and if not there, Game of Thrones and House of Cards. The global aristocracy America once shunned and bled to eradicate from our shores now provide us with our necessities, sign our paychecks, suck the life out of our children, and keep us safe. Oh, and they want their titles of nobility back. They want their perks, their titles, their delicacies and their perversions. They want this land, and they want liberties to be meted out by them, not God. In fact, they want to forget the idea of God-given liberties altogether. They want us to forget that our founding families sacrificed and died to expose and then to break the elaborate scam. Money and power usually corrupt because those who get it think themselves clever above their fellow men. Their greatness made them gods, and the trap was set. Once they tasted control, they began to express their virtue in forcing others to adhere to a moral code, and deserving to live above that code because of their high station. This is the essence of practically everything government before America. Since the global elite organize in large, top-down structures of intimidation, whispers and schemes, we must organize in community-based and decentralized structures of liberty, right thinking and transparent actions and agreements. Since they want to usurp liberty to attempt controlled outcomes, we must expand liberty by organizing consensus-based communities seeking fulfilled, impactful, meaningful and abundant lives. Their corporate hierarchical structures seek to control voice, negate vote and steal and limit value. So, we must create impactful forms and structures that do just the opposite. Reasonable and liberty-loving Americans can agree to a simplified order better protected from the snivelers, grovelers, panderers and the downright sinister. We can rebuild on principles of our own founding, and with 300 years of experience. Socialism may or may not lead to communism, but it will lead to division, dependence and war, because the ultimate goal of both is to control. The answers in the next American founding will rest on strong, well-organized communities, simplicity, transparency and a sacred reverence for the voice, vote and value of each community member. The next founding will replace much of the sophisticated legal code with juries and a simple social agreement to be genuine, to act in good faith, and to intend no harm. Freedom works. We've seen it. Its failings in the case of its most successful example, America, were mostly due to the newness of free governments and remnants of evil control systems that took time to shake off. Those who hate liberty have been undermining those who love it for the last 1,000 years. We should unmask control structures like monarchies, aristocracies, corporatism, communism and socialism, and replace them with impactful liberty structures built by design like our first founding was by default. From strong families and communities that will secure liberty for the next 1,000 peace hand sign. Red heart. Flag of the